Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Frank Turek. Before I get started, let me ask you this. How many of you have heard me before, or this is your first time? How many of you are here right now? How many don't respond to surveys? 1, 2. 1985, I had been out of college 1 year. I was in the United States Navy. I'm in Sacramento, California. We have some pastors here from Sacramento, am I right? I thought I heard that there was some pastor here from Sacramento, back up there. And I was brought up in the Catholic Church, but I never really knew who Jesus was. I went to Catholic high school. I went into college, and I always believed in God, but I just didn't know who Jesus was. And then I, in flight school, had a roommate, the son of a Methodist minister. And we're in Sacramento together, and I had question after question about Christianity. And he said, you know what? You need to get some Josh McDowell books. And so I read Evidence Demands a Verdict and More Than a Carpenter, and those are the books that really brought me into the faith. So thank you, Josh. It's a great honor to be here at this institute, kicking this off in honor of Josh. I came really to faith by reading those books. How many in here have read those books? Can I see your hands, please? Almost all of us. If your hand's not up, consider yourself undereducated. Come on, in fact, they've been updated, too. You can see on the book table out there, this has been updated. The one I read was the original, but this is the new Evidence Demands a Verdict, and there's another one coming out pretty soon, if I'm not mistaken, right, Josh? And then More Than a Carpenter, which has been read by millions of people, is actually now been updated by Josh and Sean, and it includes even some information in there on the new atheists, whom we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So those two books, and by the way, More Than a Carpenter, anybody can read. Anybody. You can give that book to anybody. It'll be effective. So please do that. Let me talk about what we're going to talk about today. I've always been told whenever you give a presentation, you tell people what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them it, and then you remind them of what you just told them, right? So here's what we're going to do. First thing, we're going to talk about our intellectual predators on campus. I'm just going to mention those now. We're going to spend a lot more time on it tomorrow. Secondly, what are student trends on campus? Josh has already pointed out some of them. I'll add some of my observations, because I've been on about 100 college campuses in about the past 5 years. And then an effective strategy to reach college students. So let's start right here at point 1. Let's talk about the reality of the college campus. First of all, 1 in 4 professors are atheists. In fact, atheists, or I should say this, college professors are 5 times more likely to be atheists than the general public. So they're distinctively left of center, and they're a self-selecting group, as you know. They select their own faculty colleagues. Also, more than half of professors have unfavorable feelings toward evangelical Christians. More than half, 53% in a survey that was designed to discover if there was anti-Semitism on campus. You know what they found? Virtually no anti-Semitism. They found anti-evangelicalism. 53% of college professors just thought evangelical students or they viewed them as unfavorable. And you know what? I really don't blame them. Because as Josh was saying earlier, when they go to college campuses and a professor asks them, well, why do you believe what you believe? They can't answer. Oh, because I have faith. That's the kind of answers they get. So I really don't blame college professors for looking at Christian students unfavorably. In fact, it's not so much that the Christian mind is lost at college. It's that the Christian mind never gets to college. They show up with nothing but feel-good emotionalism, and then we wonder why our kids walk away from the faith once they go to college. Also, only 6% of professors say the Bible is the Word of God, and 51% think it's just a book of fables and legends. So that's who we're up against here. Josh mentioned Richard Rorty. He passed away not long ago, but he summarized what college professors do. He said, we try to arrange things so that students who enter as bigoted, homophobic, religious fundamentalists will live college with views more like our own. So we're going to right on to try and discredit you in the eyes of your children, trying to strip your fundamentalist religious community of dignity, trying to make your views seem silly rather than discussable. In fact, it's not so much that Christian views are debated on campus, it's that Christian views are mocked on campus. They just assume they're crazy, and so they don't even intellectually engage Christianity and Christian beliefs. They just mock them, and that cultural pressure has many students walking away. Daniel Dennett put it this way. He's a new atheist. He said, "They will see me as just another liberal professor trying to cajole them out of their convictions," and they are dead right about that. That's what I am, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And of course, Richard Dawkins, who is very popular on college campuses now, said, "When one person suffers from a delusion, it's called insanity. When many people suffer from a delusion, it's called religion. If this book, The God Delusion, works as intended, religious readers who open it will be atheists when they put it down." So you see, he's an evangelist for atheism, and we're going to go into many more college professors tomorrow in the session called Intellectual Predators. This is just an appetizer here. These are the kind of people that are teaching our young people. In fact, the college campus is like Babylon. And you know what the air in Babylon is like? These are the books written over the past decade that have really informed the college campus. The God Delusion by Dawkins, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything by Christopher Hitchens, whom I've had the opportunity to debate a couple of times. Tragically, he died about 2 years ago. And of course, Misquoting Jesus by Bart Ehrman, who teaches at UNC Chapel Hill. Well, first of all, you've got postmodernism and relativism. Josh was talking about that earlier. That's prominent on college campuses, although not as prominent as you might think. I'll explain why in a minute. Secondly, you've got atheism and materialism. That's, of course, represented by Dawkins and Hitchens. You've also got anti-supernaturalism, also represented by Dawkins and Hitchens. And then you've got biblical criticism, that they just look at the Bible and say, this stuff can't be true. And, of course, Bart Ehrman has done a lot of work there to try and get people not to trust in the biblical documents. So this is the air on the college campus. Now, who can fix this? This is the interactive portion of the program. Yeah, you can. You can start to fix it. Pastors are very influential. I mean, you do get a captive audience, even if it is only for 30 minutes, right? That's more than most other people get. And you can set up programs in your church to actually teach the truth. Is it the silver bullet? There is no silver bullet. There is no one thing that's going to fix all this. But you can certainly start the solution. You are so important to what happens to our kids before they go to college. The number one individual that can affect a child is, of course, the parent. But after that, pastors are very influential, especially if you put in the right programs in place at your church. So secondly, what are student trends on campus? What are the trends? Here's what I've just observed. I'm not taking this necessarily from survey data. I'm not taking this from Barna data or anything else. But I have looked at data that seems to affirm what I'm about to say here. I've noticed that students are more modern than they are postmodern. What do you think I mean by that? They do believe in truth, but they just don't think truth comes from religion. They believe in truth when it comes to science, right? They believe that science does yield truth. And so I spent a lot of time on college campuses talking about scientific arguments for the beginning of the universe, the design of the universe, the design of life. Those types of arguments are interesting and effective with students because they think science does yield truth. And I think it's quite easy to talk them out of postmodernism, at least intellectually. I'll show you how we do that here in a minute. But the idea that everybody's postmodern on a college campus isn't true. You know, you hardly see any postmodernism in the physics department, right? You don't see it in the biology department. You know where you see it? Believe it or not, in the humanities, like in English class. That's where you get your relativism. In anthropology and sociology, that's where all the relativism comes in. But in the hard sciences, they're not postmodern. They're modern. They believe all the evidence from science does yield truth. Secondly, I've noticed they are interested in spiritual questions. So when Josh goes to campus, if I go to campus, if Greg Kokel goes to campus, if Abdu Murray goes to campus, these people come out for sessions like this. They will come out if it's advertised rightly. And of course, our title is I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. So when you call something I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, you get everybody from atheists to Christians and everyone in between showing up. And of course, the atheists in particular want to challenge that, so it makes for quite an interesting interaction during the Q&A. So they are interested in spiritual questions. Also, they're impressed with reason and arguments if presented well, particularly from Christians. Why? Because the bar is set so low. They think you're a total ignoramus if you're a Christian, and yet you come on a college campus and you can put two declarative sentences together in an argument. They go, wow, I never knew this existed. You'd be amazed how many, particularly even Christian students, walk away going, I never knew this. I never knew there were arguments for Christianity. I never knew there were evidences. There are. I mean, Josh has been doing this for 52 years. And yet a lot of people still don't know it's out there. I found this, I don't know if you found this, Josh, or not, but I found that even in the church, it's difficult to get people to show up for an apologetic event, but those that do show up are amazed. Where has this been all my life? And then they suddenly get excited about it. So if you can just get them in the door, you can make an impact. And they are impressed, as I say, with reason and arguments if presented well. They are conflicted by or resistant to the sexual norms of Christianity. If there's anything right now that is hanging them up is, of course, their friends who say they're homosexual. And, in fact, I was just at Bucknell University on Thursday night in Central PA, and I had a lady came up to me, a student came up to me, a young girl, and it's just to show you the kind of interest. We had a room for 250. There were 300 people in the room. So we had the people were sitting on the stairs, and this student came up to me and said, wow, that was really great. That really helps bolster my faith. I never knew there were these reasons. But what do you think about same-sex marriage? Because I think, it's equality and all this. I said, well, look, I just wrote a book on it, actually. In fact, if you send me your email address, I will email you the book. Okay, I'd love to see what you think about it. So I sent her the book. But these are evangelical Christians who are struggling. Why? Because they don't know how to answer the arguments of the other side. Of course, the arguments of the other side aren't good ones, but they have all the right slogans, right? Equal rights and all these things, and don't put discrimination in the Constitution, all those kind of arguments. They're easily answered if you know how to answer them. But these people are conflicted. Why? Because they're more interested in affirming a relationship with someone else than they are affirming their relationship with Christ. They're more interested in fraternity than they are in theology. And so if you give them reasons, then they can see the truth, and hopefully they can make the right decision after that. I know a lot of pastors shy away from what are considered social or moral or political issues. I know maybe none of you in this room because you're here, but they do shy away from them. And you know what I think that does? I think that just adds fuel to the fire. Why? Because they think, my pastor never talks about this. My pastor can't answer this. Maybe the Bible's wrong. See, that's what they think. We've got to hit these issues head on. And by the way, I know it doesn't apply to people in here, but when other pastors out there, in fact, I know of a pastor in Colorado who actually put a letter out to his congregation that he would not address political issues because he didn't want to risk losing his tax-exempt status. I say to those people, I say, look, you're not called to be tax-exempt. You're called to be salt and light. If you're worried about tax-exempt status, you're in a wrong position. And Dr. Piper here knows that at this school. He's come out strong in favor of religious freedom, and he's frankly risking losing federal money because of doing that. But we're either going to stand for the truth and let God leave the results to God, or we're not. So we have to stand for the truth. And by the way, no extra charge for this. For those that don't think we ought to be involved in politically at all, then you don't think evangelism is very important. What? How can you say that? Because politics affects our ability to do evangelism. If you don't think so, go to some of the countries I've been to. Iran, Saudi Arabia, China. You can't do what we're doing in this room right now in those countries. Not legally anyway. Why? Because politically they've ruled it out. The laws that are made in Washington, the laws that are made here in Oklahoma, the laws that are made in your hometown affect what you do every day, including expressing your religious and living your religious beliefs. So politics affects our ability to even live out our faith. If for no other reason we need to be engaged, it's for that reason. Finally, they are challenged by the right questions. If you give students the right questions, they'll be challenged by it. In fact, here's a question I always ask atheists, and maybe you should ask anybody who's an unbeliever, not just atheists, particularly on college campuses. During the Q&A, if it gets a little hostile, I'll say, hey, do you mind if I ask you a question? If I do, will you give me an honest answer? They always say yes. I say, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? On 3 occasions in the past 2 years, I've had atheists yell back at me, no! No. What? Wait, you claim to be an atheist, a beacon of reason. Never mind if atheism's true, reason doesn't exist because we're just molecules in motion, right? We're not really reasoning anyway, we're just reacting. But let's leave that aside. I ask you, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And you say no? How's that reasonable? How's that rational? It's not. The problem is not here, the problem's here. In fact, the elephant in the room on most college campuses is not evidence, it's morality and accountability. They don't want it to be true because they want to go their own way. And so when you ask them questions, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? That just blows away all the smoke that they're putting out there, that they're pumping out. In fact, I was in Turlock, California earlier this year, and we had a session near a college campus, and several college students came, and there were some evangelists in the audience that interacted with some of the atheists afterwards, folks I couldn't get to. And I had talked about this particular quotation from Pascal. Pascal said this: people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. People believe what they like, not necessarily what is true. People generally are not on a truth quest, they're on a happiness quest. What's going to make them happy? And they'll do whatever they can to believe what's going to make them happy. Of course, Paul in Romans 1 says that we suppress the truth and unrighteousness because we want to go our own way. Same kind of thing here. And I pointed out in this session in Turlock, I said, many atheists have admitted that they don't believe in Christianity, not because the evidence isn't there, but because they don't want to have the moral accountability. In fact, Thomas Nagel at NYU said in a book, I think published within the past 10 years, he said, it's not just that I don't believe in God, it's that I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be that way. And one of the most troubling things to me is that some of the most intelligent people I know are religious believers. And he said, look, I have a cosmic authority problem. And I think Richard Dawkins has a cosmic authority problem. And Christopher Hitchens, who was alive at the time, he has a cosmic authority problem. They just don't want God to exist. They want to be their own God. And after I said that, some of these evangelists went out and talked to some of these students. And they asked them, well, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And they said, no. And they asked him, well, why wouldn't you? He said, because what he said in there is right. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I don't want there to be a God. So sometimes you just have to expose people for their own benefit as to what their real objection is. Their real objection is not intellectual. The real objection is moral or volitional. Although I will say this, if you give them enough intellectual arguments, that's going to put a stone in their shoe. To the point where one day that seed is going to I'm mixing my metaphors here, but you know, you're going to plant a seed and someday it's going to blossom if they're open. Now, by the way, I will say this, that objections on the college campus come in 4 categories I've noticed over the years, 4 E's. You're going to get objections regarding to ethics, like homosexuality, or why did God kill the Canaanites, or why does the Bible seem to condone slavery, even though it doesn't. You're also going to get objections when it comes to evolution or science. You know, well, doesn't science show there is no God? Or isn't evolution true? And if it is, well, then what? Well, actually, if it is, even if it's completely true, doesn't mean there's not a God. But anyway, more on that later. Evil is another issue. If there is a good God, why is there evil? And then, of course, eternity. Questions about eternity. Will God send me to hell just because I don't believe in Jesus? In fact, I got that question at Ohio State a couple of years ago, and somebody in the audience just had their iPhone or something and videoed the exchange, and someone put it on YouTube, and it's up to, I don't know, it's got 300,000 hits or something because we're going back and forth on this issue. She's like, look, I just don't believe in Jesus. Why should I go to hell? And so those are the type of questions that you're going to get, those 4 categories. You're going to get ethical questions, questions on evolution or science, evil, and eternity. I'll give you a tool you can use to answer some of those questions very quickly here in a minute, but let's move on to our last category here. What's an effective strategy to reach college students? For me, this is what we do at our ministry. It's not the only way of doing it, but it works for us, and we've had some good results with it. There's really only 4 questions you need to answer in the affirmative to say that Christianity is true. In other words, if you answer yes to these 4 questions, you can show beyond any reasonable doubt that Christianity is true. Just these 4, not all doubt. Look, you know, obviously I'm not an omniscient being. I could be mistaken. But beyond a reasonable doubt. What are the 4 questions? Here are the 4 questions. that is some pretty groovy music, isn't it? Yeah, that is actually from our TV program that is on the NRB network, for which this is being recorded right now, on Wednesday nights and Saturday nights, 8 p.m. and 9 p.m. Central Time. It's also on midnight on Wednesday night. How many people here have DirecTV? It's on DirecTV channel 378. Like 4 of us. Come on, why not the rest of us? Friends don't let friends watch cable. Yeah, I know, come on. Actually, you don't have to have DirecTV. If you go to our website, at those times, you can watch the show streaming live. It's a 1-hour show every week. The episode on Wednesday night is different from the one on Saturday night. And you can also get the DVDs if you miss it. We're on radio, as Everett said, every Saturday morning, but that is podcasted. So you can listen to it anytime you want on iTunes. What we do is we present evidence for Christianity. We cross-examine ideas against it. One of the best shows that people say they really like is the show that Josh and I did probably about 8 or 9 months ago. If you go back, if you go into our app, and I'll tell you about the app here in a minute, but our app has all the podcasts on it, and you can search by guest, date, or subject. If you look under guest, Josh McDowell, we talk about love and what is the definition of love. I know Josh teased you with that today, but if you listen to that podcast, in fact, I had Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council call me right after that and said, wow, I listened to that interview you did with Josh. That was great. So check that one out, that podcast. And there's several other podcasts up there now you can see. Now, why are these the 4 questions, though? Truth, God, miracles, and the New Testament. Well, if there is no truth, then obviously the Bible can't be true. You know, if it's just true for you but not for me, or all truth is relative, if relativism is so, then obviously the Bible can't be true. Of course, if there is no truth, then any book written by an atheist can't be true either. Right? I mean, it's quite obvious there's got to be truth. The second question is, does God exist? You can't have a word from God if there's no God. If there's no God, throw the Bible away and every other book that talks about God. But I think there's very good evidence, and the evidence we use on a college campus and even in churches is we give 3 arguments for the existence of a theistic God. What's a theistic God? A spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator. Those arguments are taught in the Bible, but you don't need the Bible to know them. We talk about the beginning of the universe, the design of the universe and the design of life, and the moral law that shows us that this spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal, intelligent creator actually exists. In fact, the argument from the beginning of the universe, sometimes called the cosmological argument, shows that space, time, and matter had a beginning out of nothing. Once there was no space, once there was no time, once there was no matter, and then the entire space-time continuum had a beginning. If that's true, and all the scientific and even philosophical evidence shows that it is, then the cause of the universe must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, of course, powerful to create the universe out of nothing. Now, when you think of a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful first cause, who do you think of? That's what we mean by God, which is congruent with Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So if that verse is true, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, maybe the other verses are true, right? Of course, are miracles possible has to be answered, because if miracles are not possible, the Bible can't be true. But I'm here to say that not only are miracles possible, the greatest miracle in the Bible has already occurred, and we have scientific evidence for it. What is the greatest miracle in the Bible? Most people say, well, it's the resurrection. No, that's an easy miracle. Yeah, the greatest miracle is the first verse. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If that verse is true, again, every other verse is at least possible. Well, we have scientific evidence that the first verse is indeed true. So the greatest miracle has already occurred. When people say to me, well, I can't believe in miracles, I go, look around. You're living in one. This universe is a miracle. In fact, if God can create the universe out of nothing, he can do whatever he wants that's not logically impossible inside the universe. Right? If he can create the universe out of nothing, can he raise Jesus from the dead? Of course. Can he walk on water? Of course. Can he keep Jonah alive in a fish for 3 days? It's easy for a God to create the universe out of nothing. Now, some of you are going, wait, you just said something I'm not sure is right. You said God can do whatever he wants that's not logically impossible. I thought God can do anything. No, there's even some things God can't do. Like what? He can't do logically impossible things. He can't create a square circle. No such thing, right? Can't create a married bachelor, right? No such thing. Can't create a one-ended stick. No such thing. Can't create an honest politician. You know, I mean, there's just some things that God can't do, right? In fact, you can do some things God can't do. What can you do? You can lie. God can't lie. You could go out of existence. God couldn't go out of existence. You could change. God can't change. If he could change, what's he going to change from? Perfection to what? Imperfection? No, he can't change. If he could change, he wouldn't be God. So miracles are possible. The greatest one has already occurred. And then the final question is the New Testament true? And obviously the New Testament doesn't have a prayer. If truth doesn't exist, God doesn't exist, or miracles are not possible. But if truth exists, God exists, and miracles are possible, then we can see if they're actually telling the truth in the New Testament. And that's, of course, what we do on college campuses, and we also do through the book. Now, some of you are looking at that and going, what about the Old Testament? Do you believe the Old Testament's true? Well, look, if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Why? Who's in the New Testament that can authenticate the Old Testament? Jesus. If Jesus really is God, as the New Testament documents claim he is, then whatever God teaches is true. Jesus taught the entire Old Testament is the Word of God, so if the New Testament's reliable, you get the Old Testament thrown in. Right? Now, the book goes into a lot more detail, but those 4 questions keep people on track. And if you notice, by the way, you see these 4 questions? They answer the 4 things that are going on college campuses. Relativism and postmodernism, atheism, anti-supernaturalism, and biblical criticism. So they're hitting on the issues that the students tend to believe in, and we get very good results by pointing this out. Now, let me go back to what I said earlier, that students are challenged by the right questions. Let's take a look at some of the questions that we point out when we talk about does truth exist. Let me just give you a really short little segment on the presentation here to show you what we're talking about, and this will go dovetail nicely to what Josh was saying earlier before. First of all, whenever you start talking about truth, you always have to start with Jack Nicholson. Right? Tom Cruise had him on the witness stand, and he said to him, "Colonel, I want the truth." And Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." That was weak. "Colonel, I want the truth." That's right. Well, there's a lot of people that can't handle the truth. They're saying, you got your truth, I got my truth, there is no truth. Before we get into that, let's define what we mean by truth. There's a lot of definitions of truth. I'm not going to steal Josh's definition because he has the best one. He'll tell it to you later. But here's an easy definition. Truth is telling it like it is, right? If I say here we are at Oklahoma Wesleyan, that would be telling it like it is. If I say here we are at Bucknell, where I was last week, that wouldn't be telling it like it is. Or truth is what corresponds to its referent. If I'm referring to this book, I say this is a Bible, that would be true. If I say it's a Quran, it wouldn't be true. Or truth is what corresponds to reality. You are going to give them the best definition, right? Later? Okay, I'm not going to steal it because it's the best. All right? Those are good definitions of truth. Now, when you give these definitions, people are going to have problems with it. But what I try and do, before we even get to the problems, all the objections, I try and say, look, all truth is absolute truth. Something that is true for all persons, at all times, in all places. There are no relative truths. You say, wait, I can think of a relative truth. Like what? Well, it was a little windy when we got off the plane last night in Tulsa, so I felt cold. But I'm sure the people in Hawaii, they felt warm. That's relative. No, it's not relative at all. It's absolutely true for all people at all times in all places that when I got off the plane on last night, I felt cold. Remember, truth is what corresponds to its referent. And it's absolutely true for all people at all times in all places that when referring to people in Hawaii, they felt warm, if in fact they really did. Truth is what corresponds to its referent. Now, when you say that all truth is absolute, people are going to come back at you with objections. Like they're going to say things like this: there is no truth. Now, the key to diffusing these claims is to apply the claim to itself. In fact, this is the most important thing I've ever learned in seminary. This is it right here. You say, truths about God? Yeah, truths about God are very important. But how to think is even more important because you can't get to the truths about God unless you think right first. If someone were to ever say this to you, there is no truth, you should ask that person what question? Yeah, simply say, hey, is that true? Is it true that there is no truth? Because if it's true that there is no truth, the claim there is no truth can't be true, but it claims to be true. Did I say that right? I know that can give you intellectual constipation if you think about it long enough, but that's because it's self-defeating. It doesn't meet its own standard. Now, in the book, we call this the Roadrunner tactic. You can get the book to figure out why, but basically, with one little tactic, you look like a super genius. And of course, Josh mentioned this one just earlier before lunch. If someone says there is no such thing as absolute truth, you would say what? Yeah, are you absolutely sure? If you want to have some fun, or is that an absolute truth? Once again, you look like a super genius. And the big one in our culture today is this one. You ought not judge. Josh had mentioned that young girl had said that in a restaurant and, of course, polluted the minds of everybody in the restaurant with that silliness. First of all, before we look at what Jesus said, what's the problem logically with the claim? Can anyone see it? It's a judgment. So the next time somebody says you ought not judge, put your hands on your hips and say, then why are you judging me for judging? You see, it's a judgment. Now, did Jesus say don't judge and just stop there? No, what did he say? Well, first of all, righteous judge. He says it in Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 and following. He says, judge not, lest you be judged. By the same standard you judge others, you'll be judged by that standard. So before you try and take the speck out of your brother's eye, take the log out of your own eye first, then you'll be better able to help your brother. Is Jesus telling us not to judge here? No, he's telling us to take the speck out of our brother's eye. That involves making a judgment. He's simply saying, get that problem out of your life first so you can better help your brother. So this is not a command not to judge. It is a command on how to judge. In other words, don't judge hypocritically. If you've got that problem, get it fixed, then go help your brother. But it would be complete suicide to say don't make judgments. In fact, Jesus elsewhere said in John 7:24, he said, stop judging by mere appearances and make a right judgment. Everybody makes judgments. You'd be dead already if you didn't make judgments. You've made 100 judgments today between right and wrong, good and evil, safe choices from dangerous choices. Everybody makes judgments. Atheists make judgments. There is no God. Agnostics make judgments. Not enough evidence. I don't know. Muslims make judgments. Buddhists make judgments. Everybody makes judgments. The only question is, are your judgments true? I will say this, though. Jesus did save a very stern rebuke for people who were what? Judgmental. And who were they in his day? The Pharisees. And who were the Pharisees? The religious and, everybody misses this, the political leaders of Israel. The Pharisees ran Israel along with the Sadducees from the Sanhedrin. The Romans delegated most of that to them. And Jesus went after them. And he wasn't so nice doing it. In fact, you've probably heard people say this, oh, that person is such a saint. He's never said a bad word about anyone. Well, if that's the definition of a saint, Jesus was no saint. Because if you think Jesus was a sweet guy who never said a bad word about anyone, you have not read Matthew chapter 23. Of course, yeah. What does he say in Matthew chapter 23 to the Pharisees, these religious and political leaders? Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Oh, you look great on the outside. You're whitewashed tombs. But on the inside, you're full of dead men's bones. You go a mile to make a convert. Then once you make him a convert, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. How will you avoid being condemned to hell? What? Sweet and gentle Jesus said this? Yes, Jesus was not Barney. All right? Can't we all just get along, boys and girls? No. He was not Mr. Rogers. Can you say kindness, boys and girls? Well, he was kind most of the time, right? But he certainly didn't go around saying, this sermon brought to you by the letter E. Right? Jesus wasn't like that. And we've bought into the sissified, feminized Jesus. And since I'm from New Jersey, I hate that. Okay? We've got to be more aggressive than that, in a loving way, of course. Sometimes you have to be direct. Sometimes you have to tell it like it is. And if you don't, you're enabling people to stay on the road to hell. So you've got to teach the truth. Now, there's many more of these that we could go through. We don't have time. We're almost out of time anyway. But we do a lot of these on campus. We point out the self-defeating nature of relativism. And we call the Roadrunner tactic, it's an easy way for you to be a lie detector. If you can figure out how to turn a claim on itself and show that it's self-defeating, that it can't be true, then you can defeat relativism and postmodernism. And this lie detector business reminds me of Homer Simpson. Check this out.
Now we're going to run a few tests. This is a simple lie detector. I'll ask you a few yes or no questions, and you just answer truthfully. Do you understand?
Yes.
Can everybody see that's a self-defeating statement, ladies and gentlemen? All right, very good. Now, if you want to go more further in here, I've just given you 7 minutes on a presentation that takes us a couple hours to do, but you can get the book. There's a curriculum and a DVD set that goes with it. There's also a book I wrote that got me into a lot of trouble called Correct, Not Politically Correct, How Same-Sex Marriage Hurts Everyone. That's on the book table. I'll have the DVDs here tomorrow, and we'll have credit card ability to buy it tomorrow if you want. And there's much more information on our website. And by the way, all the proceeds from the sale of the books and the DVDs and the curriculum will go to feed needy children. Mine. Just so you know. I've got 3 sons. Already, their third one, the final one's in college now, so I need some help here, all right? In fact, the first two are in the Air Force now. They're already out of the house. So, anyway, let me point out one other thing. We're doing both offense and defense here, and you can do the same. The offense is truth, God, miracles, New Testament. Those are the 4 questions. The defense is pointing out that any objection brought up in evolution, ethics, evil, or eternity misses the mark. You say, well, how can I do that effectively, quickly? Well, we have an app that has all this in it. It's the Cross-Examined app. If you go to the App Store and type in Cross-Examined, 2 words, you'll find it. Or if you can't find it there, go to our website and click on Media. You'll see the app there. It'll take you to the website that will help you download it for iPhone, iPad, or a Droid device. And in the app, we have the 4 questions. In fact, here's a screenshot of the app. You can see on the top, truth, God and miracles, Bible, and then the 4 E's. So if you go to quick answers right here, you'll see these 4 categories under the 4 E's. You'll also have categories under truth, God, miracles, and the Bible. And so here you see there's evolution, there's evil, there's ethics, there's eternity. I've got a screenshot here drilling down on eternity. Here are the questions that are answered in this app. Now, these are short answers. These are like 3 paragraphs each, okay? So we got answers to why is Jesus the only way? What about those who've never heard? Will God send me to hell just because I don't believe in Jesus? Will people have a second chance after death? Why do we have infinite punishment in hell for finite sins? Why won't God just annihilate people rather than send them to hell for eternity? These are the kind of questions that we have short answers to, and sometimes we'll have a link to a longer article or a video or something like that. So now when you're in a conversation with somebody and they say something you think is wrong, you can pull out your iPhone or whatever you have with you, just hit the quick answer section, and chances are there'll be an answer to your objection or to the objection the other person has. And the idea here is not just to come back at the person with evidence, but also to ask questions. So we have a lot of questions in the app. If somebody says this, ask this question and see where they go with it, okay? So, and this right here, podcast I mentioned earlier, you can get all our podcasts by just clicking on that button right there, including the one with Josh. And I had one with Sean last year too, on his curriculum called God Quest, which is a good curriculum as well. So you can listen to any of those. And Abdu, we did a show too, didn't we? Abdu Mary's show, we got that on there too. So all of the speakers you have here have been on the show. So there you go. You can go home now. No, I'm just kidding. All right. So for instant answers, get the app. Also, it's not just us doing this, obviously. I don't know if you know about William Lane Craig. You should if you don't. Reasonablefaith.org, str.org. That's Stand to Reason. Josh.org. In fact, I was just on there today, and Josh has, as he mentioned, just an amazing display of research in there that you can access for yourself. Reasons.org, that's you, Ross. GaryHabermas.com, if you're interested in the resurrection. He's probably the best expert on the resurrection there. And most of the stuff on Gary's site is free, including video and audio. And probably the easiest way to find anything in apologetics is to go to Apologetics 315, because that's kind of the crossroads of all sorts of apologetic material. If you forget any of these links, they're all linked on crossexamined.org under the Resources and Links panel. All right? So, do we have any time for questions or discussion?
You can take 2.
2. I can take 2 questions or 2 discussions.
Either way you want to work.
All right. Anyone have any questions? No one likes to ask the first question. Let's move right on to the second question. Questions, comments, jokes, perhaps. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
like this kind of attitude.
Right.
How would you address that amongst the Christian community?
Well, in a college classroom, you don't want to really present your viewpoint if the professor gives you an opportunity, because he is a superior force and he controls the microphone. And in fact, Greg Koukl in his book Tactics has a chapter on this. When you're in the classroom, what you want to do is ask the professor to support his views, not for him to ask what your views are. Like, this is what college professors do. You'll ask a question and he'll go, "Oh, are you one of those Christian fundamentalists? Well, why don't you just stand up and tell everybody here why you think the Bible's true in, 5 minutes. Go right ahead." Gee, that's a lose proposition. And none of us could handle that in 5 minutes. There'd be too many objections that they would bring up. What you would say, or what I would say, and what Greg Koukl in his book says you ought to do, you ought to say, "Oh, sir, no, I'm not here to learn, or I'm not here to tell you what my views are. I'm here to learn what your views are, and you said something that I was just hoping I'd get a little bit more evidence for. So you're the professor. I'm here to learn from you. So if you wouldn't mind elaborating a little bit more. You said you don't believe there's a God because of X. How did you come to that conclusion?" In fact, the 3 questions that Greg asks you to ask when you're interacting with somebody is, the first question is, what do you mean by that? Right? Like somebody says, "Well, you're not tolerant." What do you mean by tolerant? As soon as they start to define it, they're in trouble. Right? If they try and define the word tolerance, they're in trouble. Why? Because if they say, "Well, you don't agree with me." Well, true, but I don't agree with you either. And why is it that when I don't agree with you, I'm intolerant, but when you don't agree with me, you're just right? So ask them, what do you mean by that? The second question is, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what evidence do you have for your belief? So I would ask questions more than make statements. And I guarantee you this, once you do that, students around the class are going to come to you later and go, "Wow, that was good. What do you believe?" Right? Then you'll have an opportunity to share your views. But to try and do it in a classroom where you got a whole bunch of hostile eyes looking at you, you want to defer the questions or the answers to the professor. You want to get him to support what he says. Remember, when somebody says something that you think isn't right, it's not your job to refute what they say. It's that person's job to support what they say. And so that's why you got to ask questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? The third question is, have you ever considered, and that's, you complete the sentence by adding something or asking a question or making a statement. Have you ever considered this particular argument? Have you ever considered this particular evidence? Or have you ever considered this particular book? Like somebody says, "Well, all morals are relative." Well, have you ever considered that murdering babies or torturing babies for fun would be something that I think everybody would say is wrong? Is it really wrong, or is it just your opinion, right? Or have you ever considered that you've just voided your opportunity to say the Nazis were really wrong? Or have you ever considered that what you're saying there would make it all right to murder homosexuals? So you take something that they really think you shouldn't do, and you say, "Well, by that principle, we ought to be able to, people ought to murder homosexuals, right? Because it's not really wrong." What are they going to say? Yes, sir.
I'm a student pastor and deal with a lot of young people, a lot of college students and things like that. And I found that one of the biggest topics of discussion or arguments or however you want to call it is sexuality.
Yes.
Homosexuality, LGBT, all the different,
Right.
Everything. It's huge. I understand that, but I just would like to hear what you, as a person who's on a college campus a lot, that I'm sure you deal with a lot of that. How do you engage with that? Because it is such a sensitive topic. I mean, you just, emotions run so high, you can't even have a normal conversation about that.
Well, I was at Ohio University, and they were protesting me being there because I wrote the book against same-sex marriage. And they were all standing outside with banners before the event. So I walked up to them and I said, "Hi, I'm Frank Turek. I'm the one you're here to protest. Why don't you come on in?" And they said, "Anybody can come on, even gays?" I said, "Of course, come on in." So they all stood in the back. There was like 400 people in the room. They're all standing in the back against the wall with these banners. Love wins, or equality, all these banners. And they stood there literally for 3 hours. Because the presentation was just under 2 hours, and then questions went on for over an hour. And the first question came from a homosexual. He came up to the microphone and said, let me get it right. is homosexuality a sin? And I said, homosexuality isn't a sin, but homosexual behavior is a sin. See, there's a difference between attractions and actions. And we all have attractions we ought not act on. And oh, by the way, the Bible does not single out homosexuality. The only sexual activity condoned by God is that between a man and a woman inside the bonds of marriage. Any other sexual activity is prohibited, whether it's bestiality, whether it's adultery, whether it's fornication. People are going, fornication, what's that? That's called premarital sex, kids. It's all prohibited. Why? Does God get any benefit out of us obeying his laws? No. He's already an infinite being. You can't help him by obeying him. You can't hurt him by disobeying him. The laws are there for us. You see, sex is like fire. If you get it in a fireplace, it's wonderful. It'll warm you. But you get sex, or you get the fire anywhere else in your house, and it will burn down your house. That's the problem. We think, oh, it's not going to matter. Sex is just physical. You think it's just physical? Let me ask you a question. Why is it different if you're assaulted sexually than if you're just assaulted physically? Why is a rape more traumatic than just a simple assault? Because there's more to sex than just physics. And everybody in this room knows it. And if you don't think there is, you can get Josh's book, True Love Waits. That's what it's called, right? Is it True Love Waits? I think it's something like that.
The Bare Facts.
Well, I have the older version, The Bare Facts, but his book on True Love Waits, he's got letters in there from young ladies asking him, I almost went down the sex trap because I never got hugs from my father. I have a distant relationship with my father, and I just want to be loved by another man. Most young ladies who are having premarital sex are having premarital sex because they're looking basically for their father psychologically. Josh documents it all in his book. So they're after a good thing, but they don't realize that it's ultimately going to result in disaster.
Let's thank Frank.
We got to go.